That means I'm recording. Hi, guys. Hi. Okay. All right. Hi, everybody. This is Alex. I am starting your very first virtual lesson with the model. Today, we are going to be covering gesture. It is the foundation for everything I teach here in life drawing. It should be the foundation to start with many drawings, figurative or not. And what gesture drawing is trying to capture the essence of movement. So I'm going to have Siri take several poses, and I'm looking to start with our concept called the main axis of movement. That's going to be an original line that describes the whole motion of the pose. I often tell my students to look towards the spine. I think the spine is a great place when you're trying to decipher the main axis of movement because it's our central support system. It is kind of a guiding line to the poses. So I think what I'll start to do right now is have Siri take some poses and I'll demonstrate that for you. I often start the class off with minute gestures and then we work our way down to 30 seconds after a little while. So just look at my paper, follow along, and that's what you'll be doing in your sketchbooks today. All right, so this is demonstrating gesture drawings and we're looking for the main axis of movement. All right, okay. So what I have here is a newsprint pad. Like I was saying earlier, it's old student newsprint pads. I'm trying to save paper. And this is your Vine charcoal. I do recommend a material like this for gesture drawing because it's very loose and fluid. You'll be able to see. And I recommend just scrap paper because nobody ever sees these but you. These are practice. Right? Gesture drawing. And Siri, if you don't mind, we'll start with 1 minute gestures, so poses that are comfortable for a minute. I've worked with Siri before. She's really great. Have a good working relationship, and she knows my gesture times. All right, minute and begin. Okay, so there she is. I'm trying to capture just the whole spirit of the pose. Secondary axis. And you can see I'm trying to keep things. I think of these as wire coiling exercises. I try to keep very loose and fluid. I try to keep an idea of anatomy. I'm not focused on edges so much as I'm building up volume. All right, and switch. All right, so one line. All right, feeling that main axis of movement. A secondary axis of movement, I feel that front leg. I'm trying to not lift my charcoal pencil up. I'm just trying to get a general sense of the dynamic movement. Once I feel like I'm kind of getting the feel, then I work towards building up volume in a dynamic sense. All right, and switch. Again, main axis of movement. I want to feel that bend in the legs. Rib cage.
Some of you guys have met me before. I think some of you people have met me before. I'm just stopping by to see how things are going for everybody. You all know I'm going to talk.
All right, and switch. So again, having some cheap paper, even newspaper is good if you can keep yourself from being distracted. This is called newsprint because it is derived from the same process. So I'm trying, here's a good example of really feeling that rib cage swing out in this pose, right? I can really feel that movement. So I'm trying to get my gestures to have that same feeling. You guys will notice I end with the head quite often because, you know, a head is the mass conception of a head is usually pretty simple. You think of, as you learned from Mr. Hale, an egg with a sphere. So I can really control proportions, kind of ending with a head versus starting with a head. If I start with a head, then everything is guided by the size of that head. When you start with the main axis of movement or the spine, you get a sense of the whole figure from the very first line, and it helps you to think more broadly about proportions from the very get-go. All right, series switch. Again, so I can do this whole pose. I was describing this whole pose be one line. I can feel that main axis line, right? Then maybe I'm going to feel, and I'm trying not to remove my charcoal too much, then I can feel that other. Feel a dip in her spine, feel her calf, her foot exposed, her chest. So you want to respond intuitively to the big movements of the figure you see. All right, Siri, switch. All right. This is a great way to start designing your own figurative poses. If you're working just from your imagination and not from observation, you can really, it's like sculpting on paper. You can really play around with and control a lot of the feeling of your figure. All right, and you can see I'm working on older drawings because these are not important. These are like practicing free throws in a basketball practice. You know, nobody is going to see these. This is a little more challenging. I feel that leg, and then I guess I feel this back leg. But I certainly you all saw, I felt this movement in her torso. And I start every figure drawing out with a gesture, because getting your figure to feel this movement is what's going to make it feel alive. It's what's going to make it feel dynamic. So always sort of generalize at first and try and feel those large directions that the figure is taking. All right. And, okay. So I definitely feel arms, back, legs. You know, there's a very sharp angle here, so I'm responding in a more rigid way. We do hardline exercises in this class eventually, and I think that's very helpful with learning figure drawing, because everybody sees organic bodies and just feels, you know, everything is a bunch of loops and circles and stuff, but really there's a lot of very hard lines in figure. All right, and switch. But I think kind of getting all of these sort of skills under your belt is what's going to make your figure drawings even stronger. Right, I'm starting with one main line, I'm trying to feel the turn, secondary axis of movement, I feel that foot, your elbow. What I want you guys to all be doing in your life drawing sketchbook. You can take references from yourself in the mirror. You can work with family members. Again, you can work with pets I was talking about. Anything that's got movement to it. Now, these poses are still, but we're still seeing how bodies move in a perceived type of motion. You know, you can imagine what stance Siri would go into after this pose. So trying to focus and isolate individual moments if you happen to work from moving subjects that won't necessarily stay still for you. So that is not going to be a problem. Just keep these moments kind of locked in your mind and work on that gesture. All right, Siri, and switch.
Yeah.
Running motion. And I'm going to have to stop talking for a second because we're going to want to start getting faster and faster. And that just helps you respond less calculated to these movements. Really getting these under your belt and growing your intuitive observation skills in this regard is really important. You know, I could sit here and do 300 gestures and I would be a better figure drawer for it because I'm just adding to my little pot of knowledge of dynamic forms. So people who draw the figure always do gestures. That's how I'm always going to start a large drawing. You'll see once we start getting into our large drawing. All right, so I'm going to go now to, you can take a break just a second, Siri. I'm going to go now to 30-second intervals so you guys can see how you can speed up in your gesture drawing. And I'll try and do that. Sorry.
Raise your hand button if you are good and you don't have any questions for the rest of this class.
Is somebody talking to me?
No, that's probably background noise.
Oh, okay. All right. Let's see. Stopwatch. Okay. All right, Siri. So these will be 30 seconds. All right. All right. And begin. Correctness is not the goal. Dynamic movement. This is one layer of your skill base or your knowledge base. All right, and switch. Proportions come in later, but right now we're working on identifying dynamic movements, not proportions, dynamic movements. Using this row of my own observations. So your gesture to be a little more wild, furious, less calculated. You know, really responding to that curve of her back. Shoulders, hands, feel the head. You know, I'm not worried about proportions and I am going quite wild. You can see how I can begin to add or reduce and sort of sculpt this figure out of this mess of wires. I always call this like wire exercise or noodle exercise or ribbon exercise because I want you guys to start to feel these sorts of movements in the figure, okay? All right, and switch to it. It's going to make your figures feel alive and not robotic, not stiff. Learning how musculature revolves around our bones, our skeletal system in a dynamic way as they're being activated through movement is what is gonna make your figure drawings have the life you're looking for. All right. And switch. I want to feel that head down. I feel that head down. Strong, straightish leg. You'll hear me talk about secondary axis of movement. This leg, here's a good example of a secondary axis. Main axis, swoosh. A secondary axis, swoosh. All right, okay, I guess these would be third and fourth axes right here. All right. You should respond to the largest forms the fastest, the ones that strike you the clearest. And then I always kind of build up volume around these big forms. All right, 30 seconds and switch. A beautiful curve from my perspective, right? I feel that curve all the way from the top of her head down to that knee. That foot is kind of off the page. I don't like that. We'll talk about that once we get into our long drawings. Feel that hand down there. But this is a great example of why this is so important, because I really want to feel there's a connected line from the top of Siri's head all the way down to this knee. And all of the forms follow that line. They all follow that main axis of movement. So here's rib cage, back of the head, the beautiful dreadlocks. There's her pelvic region, and then all the way back down to that knee, where it's resting on the ground. But identifying this movement and this feeling first, not all the stuff that you want to learn, like shoulder blades and deltoids and biceps. You know, this is what's going to make everything else fall into place where you want it to. All right. Okay, Siri, how are we doing? Why don't you take a little break, Siri, and I'll talk to these guys about a few things, and then we'll get going back into a few more gestures. So, you guys, needless to say, this is a little strange for me. I'm used to having a dialogue and working with all of you guys, but I hope I'm being somewhat clear in expressing these points. I always think of gesture as sort of just your guiding point, starting point. Like if I want to draw this arm, my arm, I could get all sorts of, off track and lose my place, being distracted by details. But if I'm looking towards the gesture and I nail that gesture, right? I nail the feel of this movement to this movement, back in space and then back down. If I get that feeling, then all of that musculature is going to line up in a realistic and dynamic way. So identifying this sort of dynamic skeletal system inside all of your figures is going to give you the best platform to start laying down some of these details that you observe. We're going to break our figures down into gesture, hard line, and then big shapes, and then we'll start to get more and more familiar with correct anatomy. I will start to use correct anatomy. I feel like I'm losing my breath in this mask, so please forgive me on that. And yeah, I guess you guys will just follow along as best you can, and I hope you guys get something out of watching these demos at least. I'm in a demo, let's see, it's 1 o'clock. I'll probably do more gesture demos for the next 30 minutes, and then I'll start a drawing, and I will talk about how I want you guys to all start your drawings, and that's very important to me, that we start to consider our figure within an image and not just always, as a subject itself. In this class, I do focus a lot on making images and making pictures, and hopefully that progresses and leads you guys into making paintings, or I know a lot of you are interested into media arts. You have cells, I assume cells in comic books and stuff. That's your own image. So I'm always thinking about how are we working with the figure in a rectilinear composition? Because most canvases, most things are rectilinear formats. Of course, there's round canvases and round comic bubbles and all sorts of things, but we deal with the rectangle mostly and how the figure fits dynamically within a space. So we're working all the time on getting to be better observers of the figure, and we're always going to be trying to be better drawers of the figure, and drawers of the figure being putting the figure in a space. All right? Okay, let's do a couple more gestures. I'm just gonna say switch when I'm getting to about 30 to 15 seconds. I think that's the ideal gesture time. Sometimes they take more, sometimes they take less. I'll also demo a longer gesture just so you can see how that could be developed into a final drawing. And in fact, you will when I start my final drawing, but we'll just do one longer gesture too so you can see that. They can see your feet. And it's okay, Sarah, you don't have to be completely visible. Yeah, but I mean, it's a drawing. I'm hoping I can figure out the most ideal visual situation. That's Sarah, you guys. She's our wonderful model. Maybe you can see, what if I angle? That's actually, I don't have a webcam. I mean, maybe I'll buy one, but I've had a lot of financial stuff recently, and this is a pretty good camera, so hopefully you guys can see everything. I think that's all right. Yeah, okay. And Sarah, definitely still do some ground poses every once in a while. They'll still be able to see what I'm doing. And we'll make sure that they can definitely see that pose when we do our final drawing. All right, so back to gestures. I'm working on 30-second gestures. Around 30 seconds. All right, here we go. And begin. So, main axis of movement, intuitively, fast, wild, relentless. Following dynamic forms. Don't concern yourself about any sort of accurate proportions, musculature. Certainly you can respond to volumes, that's what I'm doing as you can see, but I'm being very aggressive. Gesture drawings are supposed to be wild, furious, intuitive, right? And switch. Oh, right. So I'm feeling this diagonal, I feel the square shoulder, I feel that leg over there. Feel that rib cage. Here's a great idea of a gesture movement. That rib cage sinking in, right, as she's supporting herself. Maximus. All right, and switch. Boy, Siri is challenging me. These are great. No, you're fine. They're wonderful. Lots of big forms going back into space. Lots of dynamic movement. I know some of you were frustrated about pets moving or subjects moving. A great thing that I've done many a times is done poses of myself in the mirror. You have to move, and then I try and draw it from my memory. That's a great thing to do in this as well. All right, and switch. The main thing, and to just watch people, watch people as they move. I was just mentioning earlier, people are not going to be taking poses probably and standing still for you, but try and identify a moment and lock that in your mind, freeze that for a moment, and try and capture the intuitive movement. I mean, I'm a big artist, sculptor primarily, but I love my drawing. I've always been a drawer my whole life, and it's where everything starts for me. But I also work a lot with empathy. So poses, if I was going to do this pose of Siri as a long final drawing, I would take that pose. And I have students take that pose in my class. So working from yourself and working from memory is a great way to start to understand these, right? I mean, you guys can just feel like I'm holding my hands. I can feel the way my body moves, and I can start to imagine this invisible thread that's guiding all of my movements. All right? That was a long one, sorry. And switch. Cool. Okay, I feel that. Ooh, why do I feel that? There's that back leg. You can see I start at the pelvis a lot, right? Can you right here? I always kind of start at the pelvis. I find a spine and a leg that feels strongest to me usually. Then another leg is often my secondary axis of movement, right? I'm gonna feel that. Her arms are closer, so they're not as important to me in this pose. They don't catch my attention as quickly. And then I like to build, you guys will see me build up volume on legs. I build it up very dynamically. I like to think of, I never work directly with the edge, although some of my marks certainly feel edge-like. But when we're doing this, we're looking for a lot of S-curves, and I'll explain more S-curves later. But get the idea? All right, and switch. All right, so I'm definitely feeling those arms. This is hard, this on torso, and then leg. Something like that. That was too calculated, really. Back leg. Abdomen. I always include feet in my gestures. Everybody wants to skip out on hands and feet. Always include feet. You can really get a lot of description with just little triangles, right? This is kind of a front side-ish foot. Here's a back foot facing away from me. Always get your feet on. All right. Just take 1 second, Siri. You can see some other student examples of gestures in here. Some better than others. But you're going to know, like, that one's okay. You're going to draw your gestures, and not all of them are going to be great. But every once in a while, you'll stumble on things that just feel, like here, look at this guy. This is an old student's gesture. He's focusing on a lot of edges, but doesn't it feel like you really feel that hunch over, you feel that knee on the ground? So you might not get every little piece right, but you're going to start to cultivate a sense of specific movements through anatomy. All right, thank you, Siri. Sorry. She's doing so good at knowing to pause when I just keep rambling. All right, and feel that head turn. Back of the foot. Side of the foot. All right, and switch. Okay. Now, I'm sure this isn't like the funnest thing in the world to watch over and over again, you guys. Probably in class I demo like 10 gestures, and then I let you guys have at it. So really the best way to get better at gestures is to do them. You're going to have to be creative, like we said, in finding your subjects, but you are always available to yourself in the mirror, again, if you need to. And switch. Right, so I'm feeling this. I feel her torso, knees, down to feet, right? There's this serpentine little bend that I can feel. I think you'll see me start towards the center of this line often, and I do feel volumes of rib cages very early, and I feel volumes of pelvic regions very early, right? If you think about it, if you were making Siri out of a wire sculpture, you'd probably start with bigger volumes there, then you'd have some smaller wires for your arms and your legs, but you'd get a lot of your volume in those two big spots in your rib cage and your pelvic region. All right, how are we doing? Okay, Siri, why don't you take a little break? All right, you guys. So I don't know if I can cover anything else demo-wise with gestures. You guys can watch me continue to do this. But I think a lot of it is going to be getting out there and working on these yourself. Now, for those of you who have always been drawers that are concerned with accuracy, right? Like, let's say I want to draw this dog, and I'm drawing this dog, and this dog doesn't look like this dog. You know, this is going to be an exercise that's a little harder for you because you have to think that this is not going to be anything that anybody sees. This is not something that you're trying to be impressive with. This is a part of the art world that's simple practice. But you can see here in a minute, once I get going into my final drawing, that it's so helpful to start planning and designing with this process. I always encourage students to work from the inside out and not the outside in, and you guys will see more and more of that as we go along. But the very first step of looking towards that in is this gesture, right? And, you know, I equate it with the spine, the skeletal system, because we can feel, again, in that little arm demo, like let's say I feel that, but in fact, there's that deltoid, bicep, right, plane of the wrist. But I can get the whole guiding movement of something starting with my idea, my concrete idea of gesture. So, looking to start your gestures this week, look for your main axis of movement. Again, main axis of movement, that guiding line. You guys saw me start with one main line that guides the whole pose. All right, often then go towards the center, rib cage, but identify subjects, a tree, if you guys are drawing trees. Let's say palm tree, right? Very straight. Let's say one of those crawling oaks. All right, a mimosa tree, right? Ooh, very feathery. Trees have gestures. Anything has a gesture. It's just about responding to the intuitive movement. So be creative and be resourceful and find some great things from life to draw from. All right, I'm going to take a little break myself. It's 1:16, and I'm going to get started setting up for my long drawing of the day. All right, so I'm going to let this just record. I don't want to not record and have to start anything else, so I'll just be moving around on screen, but I won't take too long. Now, eventually, when Siri starts posing for long poses, you know, we'll give her adequate breaks throughout the poses, so I might be off screen for even longer. I'm just going to record the whole session as one big session. All right? Okay, so I'll see you guys in just a minute when we're ready to start our long drawing. Huh? Is it long drawing? Do you want me to be pulling you? It's okay. Not for this one. Maybe for other ones we will, but this one should be fine. Just for this very first day. Just seated, chair, something simple. Something. Take your time, Siri, with your no rush. You gotta get in with me. Something like that. Okay. All right, you guys, I'm setting up the situation so I have a little bit of dramatic lighting. You guys can see I've got very light spots and I've got very dark spots. This is helpful for creating form, and I often do set up my poses, my long poses, with a lot of dramatic lighting. It's just the easiest way to digest form in the very beginning. All right. Okay. And just take your time for 1 second, Siri. Make sure I've got it. All right. So just very easy, very comfortable. Just sit very naturally, whatever's comfortable. Although let's see if we can. What feels good for your arms?
It feels fine if I have one of them like this. I could do this.
That was nice, where your other leg was, and then your one hand. Can you tuck your other arm a little? That's not bad, but you do have just a floating hand. Let's try something else, Siri. Is that?
Yeah, this is good.
Okay. Is it?
This was fine.
Okay. How about from where I'm sitting? Yeah, that's pretty nice. Okay. Do I like Where am I? I'm here. Hey, you guys. So you can see what I'm doing, maybe. Here I am. I call these my L7s, right? Huh? L7 weenie? Anybody seen that movie? No, too old. All right, but I call these my L7s because this is just an easy way for me. It looks really cheesy, I know it does. A lot of times I have students cut out big L's, but I'm really just trying to determine where Siri is gonna fit in my picture plane, right? I've got her on the model stand, so I'm already getting a nice sense of space just with that direction of the model stand moving away from me. But again, as I was talking earlier, I want to not only start to think about my figures being structured correctly, but I want to start thinking about them being under my control and fitting them within a designated space. I don't know if you guys have been drawing figures yet and you've started drawing a figure and the foot escapes or the hand escapes. Gestures and doing some planning in a very rough state like that will help you overcome these sorts of problems. So, I like this pose of Siri. If I was going to be working on a drawing like this for a long, long time, I might spend more time on the pose. Let's see. Drawing here, you guys can see pretty well. And I'll pull it up periodically, you know, for close-ups, like, I guess. I hope this is helpful to you guys. All right. And I usually do about 20-minute sessions with Siri, unless the pose is very demanding. So it's 1:23. We'll check on you at 1:40, Siri. Is it okay? You're feeling comfortable? All right. Okay, guys. So I'll probably think of things and say them out loud. I will certainly start talking right now, but eventually when I start drawing, I'll probably just be drawing. But as I get started, I wanted to say a few things about that. So what I want you guys to always do when you are working on your long drawings is make your frame clear to you. The most important reason for this is so you start considering your rectilinear composition right off the bat, okay? On a practical but less important issue, it's also nice to have a little breathing room on the outside of your page. It's good for framing, or if you just need that extra inch, it's a good thing. But I always start with a frame. Keeps me in the zone that this is my picture plane and this is my picture box. You're always trying to create this sense of space, this picture box from your rectilinear picture plane. And when you're dealing with a rectilinear picture plane, you have some inherently dynamic lines. Okay? You have two strong diagonals from corner to corner. Actually, hold on, my favorite example. It's up here on the wall. So, this is Raft of the Medusa. All right, and you can feel this inherently dynamic diagonal line that all these characters are kind of pointing to and guiding to. All right, this is the moment, can you see it? This is the moment where they see a little ship lost in the distance and they're trying to be rescued, right? So they're following this upward, diagonal, uplifting movement. You should consider these things when you guys are starting. It's always nice to then know from your inherently dynamic diagonals, kind of where your middle plane is and where your vertical divide is. And this is all part of your compositional designing process. I make my lines very light, and then I'll often phase them in. I draw in a very painterly way, so there's a lot of layering in what I do. So I'm not concerned with lines like this coming through in other bits of my drawings. You guys will see I use pastels. When I'm working in just value scale, I use charcoal. I use a gray pastel. There we go. And I use white pastels. And it's a lot of layering. I don't know what kind of materials you guys have access to, but you can do a lot of these things in your sketchbook with just your pencil. It's just going to be a little bit of a different materials process. But I don't want you guys to get concerned about sketch lines and things being not so neat, because, you know, there's always ways to go around that. All right, so as I'm designing, okay, I've held up my 07s around Siri, and I'll tell you some things that I like. I like, from my perspective, her one leg is very flat. There's very strong movement between her thigh and her lower leg. And I like how that kind of fits in one corner, and there's a corresponding sharpness between her gluteus maximus and that shoulder right here. So, I'll show you guys what I mean. So the movement. So this is a lot easier said than done. I know this. And I'm not moving as wildly as before. Here's a good thing to observe gesture-wise. I can feel, can you guys see? You can feel that shoulder to that elbow, that hand, some volume of that leg. So can you guys see how I've kind of got a gestural idea of Siri? Now, something I already don't like about this setup right off the bat is I feel like I'm squeezing this head into this space. This feels like there's enough air and space, and I am getting a sense of air. We often talk about that in figure drawing, getting a sense of air around the figure, and I'm feeling that down here, but I'm feeling it less up here. You guys can see though, just making that simple shape kind of affected my composition. That's why I tell everybody to work as broadly as they can for as long as they can, because just a little line like this affected how I see Siri. You know, I'm sure as soon as I put the chair in, it's going to affect how I see Siri. If I did it like this, and I'm working gesturally, I erase it, and I move everything down. Starting from the interior gives you that flexibility to be able to make easy corrections without a lot of artistic investment. You know, not a lot of time. I can make my changes. I always equate figure drawing to like writing an essay. That's one of my metaphors. You know, you don't sit there and write an essay and try and get every little sentence perfect, unless you do, and then, I don't know, you might want to see somebody. But you write your essay and then you go back and edit, right? And that's kind of how I try and teach figure drawing. I'm trying to get big things right. I'm trying to get big feelings to feel right. And then I can go back and all of those little details fall into place. So this is my gesture. I'm happy I moved those shoulders down. I can feel this crunch in her abdomen a little bit more, right? I love this idea of shoulder to lower shoulder to elbow. We're going to start thinking about that a lot more in depth when we start dealing with the concept of contrapposto next week. But for now, I started with my main axis of movement, just like you guys have been doing today, right? I'm feeling the crunch. I felt that far leg because there's something very square that I like about that in relation to this. Gosh, it's hard to breathe in this mask. Don't you guys feel a nice relationship between this shape of the figure and this edge, right? There's something I kind of like about this movement of her calf and this foot in relation to this bigger space. Now that I've moved this down, I like the pointiness of that shoulder as it moves towards that dynamic diagonal, right? Did you guys see that? I ended that shoulder right there. Oh, there we go, right there. So I'm getting basic skeletal framework, gestural framework, all the framework in to have a good foundation, We always work on our foundation before we put in the windows. All right, so after I do that, I jump to big shapes, to be honest, but I don't know. Tell you guys to do. All right. So you guys, my next step after this is I always go in and really tone my paper. If you guys were all here, I doubt a lot of you would move on to that step right away. So let's talk about what I think would be good for all of you. So after this, I'm continuing, let's just work on volume. I'm continuing to flesh out volume in a dynamic way as much as possible. Now, I'm employing a lot of techniques that we're going to learn in preceding exercises. You know, we do an exercise where we're working with the side of our charcoal like this and moving towards the big shapes of light and dark. And that's where I would encourage you guys to go. So a lot of drawing from life is assessing value situations and relationships. And I've moved very far from linear drawing in terms of the steps I take first, because I really want to get a sense of atmosphere and light in my drawings these days. And so line doesn't really become important to me until a little further along. I think line is very important. And I love line, but realism can be a little difficult when you're just thinking about things in a linear way. So right now, Siri's got a chalkboard behind her. I'm feeling the darkness of the chalkboard. When we start talking about space, I don't think you guys have to include every detail, but the ones you do decide to include are going to become part of your compositional elements. So picking and choosing what you want to represent is important. About 5 minutes, are you doing okay? Work reductively a lot, so let's start with the background. So after I get a sense of the gesture, you might say I'm working on sort of a gesture of my light and dark shapes. Everything is pretty rough, but I'm starting to just think about where light is hitting these big forms. So I'm trying to still be very loose, right? I'm making steps closer and closer, making decisions about where things should go, but I'm not investing any amount of time. Like I'm not sitting there and trying to perfect Siri's face. Now I'm not sitting here and trying to perfect Siri's foot. I'm trying to let this all develop unanimously, at the same time. I'm trying to let this all develop together as one unit. Doesn't always work out that way, but it's a good way to begin figure drawing. I mean, I imagine a lot of y'all's experience with figure drawing involves copying photos. I do believe there's a time and place for that, and it certainly grows particular skill sets, but it's a different part of your brain that you're using. For sure, that's clear. Drawing from life is like trying to solve a puzzle, and you have all these different elements that are coming into play. So if you guys have ever done puzzles, you know, it's like you're sorting all the red pieces of the red balloons over here. It's all the blue ocean pieces over here. I'm trying to get everything to vibrate to where it needs to be. I'm not starting with a piece of the puzzle and trying to fit and find and get these little pieces. You just end up going crazy. So keep working as broadly as possible. You can see here I was compelled by her arm. I just got a little bit more detailed with her arm. I think that's interesting musculature. Not going too much further than that. Because what if I make this stellar arm and it's too long for the body? What if I make this stellar foot and I have to move it? I think being willing to allow your image to grow and evolve is what makes really great, strong beginning figure drawings, no matter what experience you have drawing the figure from life. So you saw me work very organically, but I'm moving quite fast now to hard lines. I was just getting a little bit of that foot of Siri in, but you can see I'm using very hard lines to describe the architecture of that foot. I think that's a good place to jump to after you get your gesture in your picture plane and you get the general idea of what your figure or whatever your subject might be from home is doing. Now remember, you guys, like in our learning module, 5 pages of gesture sketches, right? And then, 5 pages in your sketchbook and then 1 final drawing. So every week you're uploading those 6 images to me. Biggest thing I can do in these early stages too is give myself some space between the drawing. If I just lean back this far, I'm getting, can you see? I'm getting some nice space between her foot and her head. I actually think that's pretty good. A little bit shoulder, a bit higher. But what's not so good is this leg, right? This leg is not so good. And why is it not so good? Because now it doesn't feel like it's fitting in her pelvic cradle, and it doesn't feel like it's part of the space. Somehow you can get a sense that this foot is first, then this knee, moving back to the shoulder, right? That part of the figure is starting to feel spatial. But that little leg is kind of throwing it off. So what to do? I'm leaning back, right? But I could even step all the way back and get even more clarity. And so I've made a mistake, right? Sometimes I think it's great to see mistakes more than anything. That's a little dramatic, but I assessed that everything was too high. So because I didn't invest a lot of artistic energy, into that. Let's give it another go. So there's a little bit more of an angle this way. Ah, much better. And why? I don't know, because this line, right? This space between the feet feel right. Okay, so things are starting out rough, but they're getting there. And I think it's time for series first break. So just give me 1 sec, Siri, mark your feet. We remember this, don't we? There you go. All right. How's 20 minutes feeling? I know that it's a little stiff
It's
after
fine,
a
like
while.
literally my whole body's fine except for my neck,
Okay.
but like it's fine for 20 minutes.
If you, at any point in the pose, you just need to stretch your head around, of course. I'm not gonna get too detailed on your face today. So. So you guys need an eraser if you don't already have one. I know you guys are getting supplies sent to you and they should be there eventually. I do think that these charcoal materials are the best materials to be using when you're trying to work like this. They're very similar to paint in the way that they handle and maneuver. And you guys will all be going into figure painting after this. So getting used to working this way is helpful. I know it's going to be daunting to a lot of people who are used to working illustratingly, like, especially if you've been, if most of your figurative work is derived from manga, comics, cartoons, it does sort of push a young artist to work in a very illustrative way. That's a different way of working. I think it's got its place, and I think, it's very helpful, and it teaches you a lot of skills, but it is quite different from observational drawing. And I encourage you guys to do both. Both will teach you things. Sarah, if you want, it's 1:47. You want to take a little bit of a longer break? Or?
After this, we're gonna do another 20-minute quiz, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then another one.
Probably.
Okay, so I'll take 3 more minutes as break, and then is that cool?
Yeah, and then we'll take a longer one between the next one. All right, I've just cleaned up my background a little bit, just smudged some of the charcoal in so you guys can see how things are developing. I've moved to hard lines. I'm feeling this crunch in her abdomen, but things are all still, you know, they still have a lot of room to move. They still have a lot of room they can be changed, be altered. Nothing is set in stone. And I'll go over anatomical tricks and tidbits that I can think of as I'm drawing. You know, a lot of these things come up organically as I would typically move around the room and help you all with your own drawings. And I'm hoping when we start to get into our discussions and stuff, you guys will also talk about some of your drawings you've been working on from life. Go. Let's see. So now I'm just going back and making corrections as I go. All right, I want to get this feeling of serious head moving a little longer. That crunch through the shoulder. And notice I'm coloring in her hair kind of early. You know, it's a big dark shape. It's going to affect how I see my other shapes. trying to identify bigger shapes. Always take a second to get back from your drawing. Really, things become so much more clear to you when you have a little bit of space. Something that's very helpful and important, which we'll certainly talk a lot more about, you guys, is discovering and identifying your medial line. So it's the center of our body, the line that runs down the center of our body. You can, find that clavicle, the dip in your clavicle, your collarbone, trace it down your abdomen. But finding how forms relate across your medial line is very, very helpful. Again, we'll talk about that more and more as we start developing our drawings and working on new exercises, especially in the hard line exercise. But right now, I still want you guys to just respond to big movements. Try not to let my drawing right now discourage you in any way, like, wow, I don't know how to get there, Alex. It doesn't matter. You'll get here eventually. I've just done this many, many, many times. There's nothing you guys couldn't do eventually, with more practice. Of course, the old mantra, practice makes perfect. I've been interested in the figure, since I was a young kid and drawing, so I've drawn the figure many, 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 many times. But I believe that anybody can be a great figure drawer, a great drawer in general, with diligence and practice. And as we know, figure drawing can be one of the most difficult things because it's so demanding, right? We're all humans. We all know when a human doesn't feel correct easily. Even somebody with no artistic or anatomical training can spot something in a drawing that feels off of a human.
Do you know how drawing is the basis of painting?
Mm-hmm.
Is it also the basis of sculpture?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, I start thinking about a sculpture kind of in a drawing sense. Certainly, I'm sketching it, of course, but I also think about these gestural lines in relation to a sculpture from the very beginning. Yeah. I hope that was clear. Beyond just the sketching, I do think of sculpting in terms of drawing very, very often. So what would I do here, right? Again, I've been doing this for a little while and I feel like this isn't the greatest drawing in the world, but it's got a place to go. It's kind of still sketchy. It's got big forms. She feels seated. She feels relaxed in the chair. I'm getting a sense of foreshortening here on this thigh. Make it feel a little better. But where to go from here? Well, I will probably start removing some of these harsh lines. There are certainly lots of lines in figure drawings, but you have to make sure that you give all of your edges and all of your lines certain care. If I'm looking at Siri, I can feel, let's see if I can draw it first. There's a part of her leg. So crazy. Okay, there's a part of her leg that is knee to calf, and I can feel that darkness in the overlap. And then that's her foreshortened, compressed thigh moving back. But see, here's a line in my drawing. So I'm not trying to remove all outlines and all lines from my drawing, but I'm just trying to be selective of my edges. Like this one is bad. This one is gross. This is flattening out my form. A Syria's African American, her skin is a little bit darker than, the model stand, but not by many, many values. So I have to kind of decide how I'm going to describe these edges. I tend to, if it's a color situation, if I was painting Siri right now, there are moments in her flesh and on the drawing stand that are the same value. So it would be a color difference that's separating form. Sometimes when you're working in black and white, you have to kind of push things to the extreme because things that are described by color in reality are sometimes lost in a value translation. So for instance, the top of her thigh, right here, I'll eventually probably tone it a little darker to something like that, but I want to start to realize that this shape is different from this shape. So I still probably want my atmosphere space to be a little darker. So in the end, it's a value change that creates form versus a line that creates form, right? It's not very good, but you see where I'm going. a break. You know, the biggest thing I see in figure drawings is in beginning figure drawings is people get so mad right off the bat when things aren't working right. My gosh, do you know how long it took me to get to something like this? A long time. So don't feel bad if things aren't lining up or it's not looking as you think it should. It's just that every day you hope to get a little bit better. And again, I said this before, it's hard. Damn, figure drawing is hard. Or it's easy to get a little nervous about it. But what I'm trying to communicate is don't be nervous. And just try your best. You have to start somewhere. You have to start somewhere and you will grow. Every figure you draw, you will get better. So, what do I want to do? Maybe I want to start looking for stuff. There's all sorts of charcoal that I use. I got some big, chunky sticks. In this class in person, I like to encourage, so not only do we work on figure structure and we work on compositional design, I also push everybody to start working large for the first time. So often we end up doing life-size drawings, which means you go through a lot of charcoal. So these big jumbo sticks are good for that. Contrarily, you always need some little guys, so you can get in there with the details. I'm running low on my small charcoal pieces. And you guys may have come across some drawing instructors before who told you not to use a blending stomp. And generally, I don't like the blending stomp for the same reason they don't like it in that regard, that it's not for making, for me, it's not for making smooth value transitions like you would with graphite. But I do use this tool for unifying, for me and for charcoal, for paint. Right? Like I'm using it to kind of massage almost my charcoal material into the paper. And it just helps me keep things clear. You guys can do that with graphite if you're working from pencils from home. But try and remember what your drawing instructor said and don't use it for those smooth gradations because it's so easy to spot and it just looks amateurish. So let's try and stay away from that. But as I'm going, right, I kind of want to get rid of some of these lines. And I want to start unifying some shapes just so I can kind of have a place to reference from. Eventually, I have to start making some decisions, right? So you got to decide sometimes. And I'll show you guys this pastel. I really get a lot of mileage out of pastels. And when you start working with paint, that's where you begin, right? A black and a white, or a brown and a white, or something and a white. Because you really want to start working in the value scale in regards to depicting form as early as possible. And believe me, I know I hear a lot. I don't like working in charcoal. I can't blow. I just tried to blow. I can't blow. What do I do? Well, at your own homes, you'll be able to blow on your drawings. And so again, before you guys get supplies, I know you all will be working with your pencils, but if you have some charcoal laying around from other classes, I definitely encourage you guys to start working with it. Great drawing material, and again, it just helps us leave the illustrative realm and move on to painterly realm. And I'll talk more about hands and feet. Everybody always wants to know more about hands and feet and head. But look at what I'm doing right now. You know, I tell my beginning students, hands, feet, and heads are kind of like whole mini bodies in themselves. You could spend a day on the body and you could spend a day on a head or hand. You know, they're very complicated. So in these longer drawings, when we're not working so close, I use some simple drawing techniques as kind of placeholders before I get to that. You guys saw with my hard line exercise, getting a generalized foot in. You can see with my hand, I've got sort of a generalized mitt in. And with my head, Siri's wearing a mask right now and I'm drawing from life, so I'm just including that mask. But I always have an idea of the eye socket. I know she looks a little crazy right now like that, but I don't think about the eyeball. I think of the whole eye socket in relation to the skull in a phase like this. Now, as I start to develop things more, I'm going to start to pick out those details that I want. But this is a great example. If I nail that socket, that eye socket down, then I know that my details, i.e. the eyeball, is going to emerge from a place that's correct. So trying to find and observe your correct foundational landmarks, like an eye socket, is going to help you in the long run. Here I am, close up. Yeah, she looks crazy with eye sockets and a mask, but you can see I'm starting to pull volume, form. She's starting to feel like she's in some air. She's really flat on the bottom still. Got to give that some attention, but it's getting there, all right? And it's all evolving slowly and organically. Now I'm darkening my brown plane just a little. Give me a little sense of the air getting darker behind her. I'll pull material into my form quite often. And this is just a technical thing, but here's a good example. Okay, so this arm is quite outlined right now. Often I'll pull material into that form to remove that and then go back within my form and clean it up. So you all have to get into the habit of pushing and pulling your edge. In this class, we do not ever start with the edge of a drawing and color in. There's no drawing and coloring in this class. So that's a great technique. Everybody has to find their own sort of way, just like you do with paint. Everybody has to find their own sort of way with working with their material, their charcoal, but I can certainly pass along things that have worked well for me. And pulling into form and then going back with my overlapping form value is one of those things that's very helpful for me. So doing that, I felt like her elbow got a pull some more length. What did we start saying about 50? I just took a little break. I think it's fine. I feel like she's a little long in the torso right here. Something about her feels a little long, and it's good to always, I just took a big step back so I could reevaluate this. I think a lot of figure drawing is problem solving too. I think she probably just feels long in her abdomen, somewhere around here, because I like shoulder, elbow, knee relationship. This feels right, but something about this feels a little long. So I'll probably try and lift her pelvis up just a little bit. That's better. Yeah, now her one leg is a little long. You see, drawing from life is that puzzle you're playing with yourself. I was able to shorten her torso. I like that. I brought her gluteus maximus up there. I think that shortened it, but now I feel like this leg feels a little long. But you know what? I haven't invested a lot of time. So it's very easy for me to just scoot things back when I want to. Think of your black and white, right? Did you guys maybe see how I did that? This was light, so I just took my black charcoal and now I'm scooting everything there and I'm bringing the darkness of the back of her calf back so it's not like I'm drawing the edge of her leg with line. It's like I'm painting. It's like I'm painting over it and moving the line away with value, right? The big value blocks. I think one more session and one mini session probably will finish for the day. And it's been a while since I've drawn from the figure, you guys. I'm a little rusty myself. I'm sure you guys have all experienced that when you've had a little hiatus from your artistic studies. So I'm finding myself going through steps a little more slowly than I might typically be, but that's not a bad thing with you guys. I think you'll see further along down the semester, we'll all be able to move a lot faster through these preliminary steps. Although you don't want to go too fast. And I use reductive methods often when I'm drawing small little things. Like right now, I'm trying to carve away some idea for fingers, and I'm kneading up my eraser. Let's see if you can see that into a little point. It's a nice thing about a kneaded eraser. You can knead it, and I can get a fine little point with my kneaded eraser. Sometimes I get lazy and I just do that with my white material, my white pastel or something. But I try and hold off on the white pastel for as long as possible. Just in my own practice, I'm trying to control my value a little bit more in that regard. But just in terms of teaching, I'm also encouraging my students to try and hold off a little bit on the white pastel, because once you go in with that, it's kind of a permanent decision. And generally, I really like it. Like you can see on this thigh, it's feeling nice, it's feeling round, but it certainly is separate from the rest of the drawing. So the fact that I went in with this white pastel means it has to be unifiedly applied, and it will be. In these drawings, it definitely allows me the ability to go quicker. But I'm going to try and keep working, and personally, my own artistic practice, I'm going to keep working in my charcoal phase a little bit longer in some of the subsequent drawings, I think. You can see my materials are all very meager. This is a shop cloth. You can use a good old vet. This is the remnants. You can use a good old kitchen paper towel. This one is loaded with charcoal. Near the end of the semester, in my other classes, we always end up working on a long drawing from the model, so we can really kind of flesh out some of these ideas and concepts. And at the end of our 12 weeks, I'll probably do the same with Siri, because it's good to, I think these hour drawings are really good when you're starting out, but eventually you want to get somewhere where you're seeing all of your skills go into a really finished drawing, which you will need for your final self-portrait from the mirror, remember. So I think I'll do a couple session drawings at the end of the semester. So I'm always cautioning students to not over-model in the beginning, and I'm really not trying to be precious with values right now, but I am trying to get a general idea. Just like I try and get a general idea of big movements with the gesture, right now I'm trying to get a general idea of light and dark shapes. Still considering where my figure is sitting within the picture plane. I'll zoom up on various areas. I'm still getting. Now she looks floaty, right? There needs to be more dark stuff right here. You get a general sense of space moving back this way along this dynamic diagonal. Always take a minute to assess where you are and where you're going. When you're drawing feet, I always say err on the side of bigger than smaller. Same with hands. If you're drawing hands and feet, it's opposite for heads. If you're drawing hands and feet, always err on the side of bigger. When you're drawing heads, always err on the side of smaller. It's just, I don't know what it is, but beginning figure students will draw small hands and feet and really big heads. So if you just think about that in your mind, something you can overcome. I always tell students too to think about, keep your weaknesses in mind. I have weaknesses. One of my weaknesses, I make really long legs. I don't like short legs in drawings. So I think I have a tendency to overemphasize long legs. And, of course there's other million weaknesses that I have, but I just try and keep in mind the things that I struggle with as I'm drawing. And just maybe to check myself on them a little bit more frequently. So if you're guilty of making heads that are too big often, or you're guilty of making tiny little baby hands, just check on that as you're going. Keep those kind of things in mind. And if you've never drawn the figure before at all, you don't have anything to worry about. Progress check. Moving through, still working on my big forms, still thinking about my figure in space. And, you know, I know these anatomical forms and I'm certainly working on them, and we'll cover that a lot more. We get into anatomy about halfway through the semester. Because I think these foundational things are far more important than, I don't know, drawing a bunch of anatomical people. And you guys probably gleaned a good bit of information along those lines from your Robert Beverly Hale lectures, right? He spoke a lot about how we're depicting life on a two-dimensional surface. This is a hard hand for me. It's very foreshortened and it's gripping around the thigh. But again, I'm just feeling it out. I'm just feeling the hand out with my kneaded eraser right now, right? I've kind of drawn the roundness of the knee and I'm trying to get that hand resting and wrapping around. And this is where it's good to have some charcoal pencils at your disposal. You know, eventually you're going to want finer materials to get in there for your detailed areas. As long as you guys are drawing from life for a good hour on all of these sessions, you'll be able to go back and have your portfolio of 12 drawings, and I can 100% guarantee if you do them with sincerity, you will be a better drawer by the end of those 12 drawings. Guaranteed. Whatever they may be. Yourself, your family, your friends, your pets, your room. All of these sort of proportional things and all of these light and value things I could be working on without Siri. I could draw this chair and it would help me to draw Siri at another time. You know, it's about, as artists, you're certainly gonna have to be self-motivated, and in this situation, it's probably taught you that. We're back in classes again, but you know, I hope most of you, I hope all of you, most of you, I hope all of you were continuing to work on your work without any instruction, because when you're out of school, there's nobody sticking a poker in your back telling you to get to your studio. So you've got to be self-motivated, or this is probably not the best field for you. So be motivated and try and find subjects you're interested in. Or yourself, you know, all of my sculptural work is basically autobiographical. Every sculpture I've done is from myself as a reference. Well, in the last few years anyway. And right now I'm still very much interested in it. So you got to figure out what makes you tick as far as being an artist goes. It's going to really serve you well in this class anyway. Boy, I just keep messing up this hand. So here's another good lesson. I don't think, sometimes when you're getting into a position or something that's giving you trouble, I'd like to jump around and take a little break and go back and give myself just some general ideas. But I know y'all have probably been working on a drawing and you've just been working at something, some little part is giving you trouble and you just work it to death, or at least that's what it feels like. When you find yourself doing that, or you feel yourself doing that, take a little break. I was doing that hand was frustrating me, but I just erased it and put a little place marker. Okay, I don't want it to be gone because I still want to consider my composition of the figure as a whole, but move on. Work around as much as you can. 12:46, 2:46. How are you doing, Sarah? I don't know when we started. Do you think we could go, we just go another 10 minutes? Probably calling. one thing that this situation is not so great for, and hopefully I'll try and solve this problem, but I don't think drawing seated is the best situation. I always encourage people to stand while they're drawing. You're looser, you can step back more readily, you're just able to be a lot more productive, really, when you're standing in every single way. So if you can set up a situation, if you have an easel where you can stand and draw, that's what you guys really want to do, because I can feel myself not stepping back enough and evaluating this. And I think it would go quicker if I was. So definitely you guys are able to find a way to stand. All right, you guys. All right, Siri, I think we'll call that a session. Let me just have a few words with these guys about the drawing, and then can we chat real quick before we call it a day?
Yeah, or should I sit here?
No, no, go ahead. Take care of yourself. All right, you guys. So here's my long drawing for the day. There's some good things, some things that could be better. But you saw how I started from gesture and moved my way to large shapes. There's definitely some evidence of anatomy, but I'm not concerned with that. Everything is still very simplified, very geometric, right? But the very first step is that gesture and getting that idea of that figure fitting within the picture plane. So, remember what I'm looking for your sketchbook today. So for your Tuesday session, your life drawing sketchbook, I want you to spend several hours working on gesture, maybe an hour. So in this class, it's a 3-hour class. Your class is a 3-hour class. I usually do about an hour and a half of gesture, practice work, and then either an hour or an hour and a half of your final drawing. And so I want you to replicate that situation at home. So again, this is a good gesture page. Thinking about the main axis of movement, not thinking about edges. I'm not considering edges. I am building. When I say axis, main axis, you guys think of a globe. A globe, right? Spinning on its axis. So when you guys are doing your gestures, let's say this is a cylinder. But let's say this cylinder represents a thigh or a neck or something. Think about that main axis of movement and then filling that volume. I do that a lot on legs. You guys can see this leg, for example, a main axis of movement, and then I'm building up volume for the big shapes that I see. So when you guys are doing your gestures, just keep thinking main axis of movement, working from the center towards the way out, okay? Do an hour and a half of those. Then you want to do your longer drawing from life, right? This is all described more clearly in your learning module. I want you guys to, in these long drawings, these aren't sketches, okay? I want you to keep your picture plane in mind and how this figure sits in your picture plane. We want to start working on our compositional design skills, okay? So, 5 pages of gestures and 1 page of a final longer drawing. I think that will conclude our virtual class today. I hope you guys enjoyed it and got something from it. Please email me if you have any questions. I'll be in contact. Your Poussin study starts on Thursday, and that is actually, let's talk about that for just 1 second. I chose those Poussin studies because they're covering exactly what we're trying to do in our longer drawings. It's a finished sketch drawing, an ink sketch drawing, but the whole picture plane is considered, and he just uses minimal values to describe form, all right? So a lighter color, a medium color, and a darker color. And I want you guys to start thinking about working on form in that regard, all right? I'll probably make another little video about a Poussin study just to have a little bit more explanation with that. All right, you guys, I hope you all have a good day. Always email me if you need anything. Bye-bye.